You didn't become insecure by accident. You didn't feel guilt out of nowhere. It was installed, precisely, repeatedly, until you thought it was part of you. Someone said, "You're so selfish," the first time you said no. And ever since, every boundary comes with guilt. Someone told you, "You're too much," when you expressed joy, intensity, presence. And now, you dilute yourself before others even ask you to. That's not sensitivity. That's conditioning. And the most dangerous part, you don't question it, because the emotional reaction feels internal, feels personal, feels like truth. But it isn't. It's a mind hook, an emotion tied to a behavior, tied to your identity, without consent. Now, every time you try to evolve, that same emotion returns, not to stop you, to remind you who you're supposed to be. It doesn't matter how much you've grown. If the hook is still there, you'll obey the emotion like it's instinct. But it's not instinct, it's programming. Someone else installed the shame. Someone else attached fear to your expression. And you kept it, because no one ever showed you how to remove it. Until now. Because this isn't about becoming better. It's about unhooking what never belonged to you in the first place. We start there. A mind hook is not just an emotion. It's an emotional leash, tied to your identity, disguised as truth. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It says, if you say no, you're selfish. If you speak up, you're difficult. If you ask for more, you're ungrateful. And every time you act outside that script, the emotion pulls you back. Not with logic, with guilt, with shame, with fear. You feel something is wrong, but can't explain why. So you assume the problem must be you. That's how the hook works. It ties emotion to behavior, and then wraps that behavior into your identity. Over time, you stop asking, is this true? You start saying, this is just who I am. But it's not who you are. It's who you were trained to be, to feel safe, liked, accepted, invisible. Mind hooks are often installed early, before your boundaries were formed, before your logic was strong enough to reject the association. You said no. They punished you. Emotion attached. Pattern installed. You expressed joy. They mocked you. Emotion attached. Pattern installed. Now, every time you move outside the hook, it hurts. Not because it's wrong, but because the nervous system learned to avoid emotional punishment. And that pain you misread as intuition. But it's not. It's just a system doing what it was conditioned to do. This is the trap. The hook doesn't just control your emotion. It controls your self-perception. You confuse reflex with identity. You confuse reaction with reality. So the first step isn't healing, it's extraction. You pull the hook out, expose where it's attached, and separate the emotion from the self. Because what you feel is not always who you are. Next, we trace how those hooks got installed, so you can stop blaming yourself for a pattern that never started with you. Mind hooks don't need trauma to form. They need repetition in a moment of vulnerability. And the most effective ones? They're implanted quietly, subtly, when you're too young to defend against them. They come from three main sources: family, culture, intimacy. Family first. A parent says, you're too sensitive, and you believe it, not because it's true, but because you're too young to question authority. Now, every emotional response feels excessive, even if it's completely valid. You tone yourself down, so they don't withdraw. Hook installed, or you're constantly praised for being easy, quiet, helpful. You start associating love with being agreeable. Now, when you say no, you don't feel strong, you feel unsafe. Hook installed. Culture reinforces the pattern. You hear, don't make a scene. Don't be selfish. Good people don't ask for too much. N, every message says, detach from yourself to stay loved. And every time you comply, you feel accepted, but only by abandoning parts of you. Hook reinforced. Then comes intimacy. The partner who only shows warmth when you're quiet, when you don't question, when you perform peace. You learn to equate compliance with closeness. So when you finally express your truth and they withdraw, you don't blame them. You blame yourself. Hook upgraded. By the time you realize what's happening, the hook isn't just emotional, it's structural. It's embedded in your nervous system. It fires without thought. It activates without logic. And worst of all, you think it's you, but it's not. It was installed through repetition, through silence, through every moment. You had to shrink to stay safe. You didn't consent. You adapted. Now you pause. Every time you feel something strong, not because it's wrong, but because you've been trained to fear it. This is the invisible cage. You stop acting from instinct and start filtering through emotional warnings that don't belong to the present moment. To break this, you don't reject emotion. You separate it from identity. Next, we cut the hook clean, without damaging your ability to feel what's real. Cutting the hook without killing the signal. You don't need to stop feeling. You need to stop obeying feelings that aren't yours. Emotions are data. Hooks are commands. And the reason you feel stuck is because you're obeying every feeling like it's truth, when some were just installed to control you. The goal isn't disconnection, it's separation. You separate the signal from the story. Here's how. Step 1. Label the hook. You feel guilt. Don't say, I feel bad. Say, this is guilt conditioning. Just that shift creates distance. You're no longer inside the emotion. You're observing it. Step 2. Interrupt the link. When the emotion shows up, you pause. No response. No justification. Just space. The nervous system is used to auto-reaction. Interrupting it once breaks the illusion of necessity. Step 3. Run a logic override. Ask yourself, if saying no is selfish, why do I feel stronger when I say it? If asking for what I need is wrong, why do I feel more grounded when I ask? You start creating contradiction, and contradiction is how the loop collapses. Example, you say no to a last-minute request. The guilt rises. You pose. You say, this isn't truth. It's programming. You walk away. No repair, no explanation. And the world doesn't end. You didn't lose love. You didn't collapse. That's when the hook loosens, because a hook can't hold where there's no reaction. And once you do this enough, the body stops pairing guilt with truth, shame with identity, fear with visibility. Emotion becomes emotion, not evidence, not instruction, not identity. That's the shift. You don't eliminate the feeling, you eliminate its control. Now it can rise without moving you. You feel it, but you don't follow it. And that's where power lives. Next, we rewrite the internal code so the system knows how to operate without the hook. Once the hook is separated, you're left with space. But space without code will always get rewritten by old patterns. You need a new language, a new label system, one that's built from choice, not compliance. Because every hook was powered by a false label. You're too much. You're selfish. You're weak. You're cold. And over time, you stopped questioning them. You started living by them. To take back your identity, you don't need affirmation. You need definition. You choose what things mean, and then you repeat that meaning until it becomes unshakable. Start here. Step 1. Identify 3 trigger labels. What names come up when you act in power? When you express honestly? When you refuse? Maybe it's too intense, rude, self-centered. These aren't observations. They're control mechanisms. Step 2. Create the rewrite logic. For each label, craft a new statement that reframes the same action through strength, not shame. Example, old label, you're cold. Rewrite, stillness is not cold, it's clarity. Old label, you're too much. Rewrite, their capacity doesn't define my expression. Old label, you're selfish. Rewrite, self-prioritization is not a flaw. It's structure. Keep it sharp. Unapologetics. Non-negotiable. Step 3. Speak it in silence. You don't need to argue it out loud. This isn't for them. It's for the system. When the trigger rises, repeat the new code. Internally. No performance. No energy leak. Just authority. Because the nervous system isn't listening to your logic. It's listening to your consistency. When you meet shame with structure, again and again, it stops showing up. The mind learns. This isn't where we collapse anymore. This is where we stand. And from that moment on, they can call you whatever they want. But it won't stick, because their words have no hook to land on. Next, we build the armor that makes this identity unhookable in every environment. You've separated the hook. You've rewritten the code. Now you build the armor. Not the kind that protects you from feeling, but the kind that makes you unreachable through emotional pressure. Because if they can still trigger the old emotion, they can still access the old version of you. That ends here. Armor is not resistance. It's recognition. It knows exactly what to allow, what to reflect, what to discard. 3 layers. Layer 1. The audit loop. Every time a strong emotion rises, you don't ask, "What do I feel?" You ask, "What identity is this emotion trying to push on me?" If guilt arises when you rest, the hidden message is, you're lazy. You don't fight it. You tag it. Hook attempt. Denied. This loop rewires your response. Feel. Name. Decline. Clean. Fast. Powerful. Layer 2. Boundary firewall. Every person who still interacts with your old self will try to test the edges. They'll say, "You've changed. You're not as kind as before. You don't care anymore." Good. That means the firewall is working. The moment you feel the need to explain yourself, pause. You don't explain new architecture to people still living in outdated code. Firewall holds. You move on. Layer 3. Stillness protocol. No energy wasted. No loops re-entered. When they bait emotion, you give stillness. When they question change, you give neutrality. When they throw shame, you don't throw logic, you withhold response. Stillness is not silence. It's a refusal to participate in anything that tries to make you prove what you already know. And over time, people stop testing, not because they agree, but because their tactics no longer work. You're no longer accessible to the version of you that needed their approval to feel whole. Your identity becomes a closed system, fully defined, internally validated. emotionally encrypted. Now, you don't just survive their pressure, you render it irrelevant. Final step. Turn this into your new default setting. One principle, one sentence, one irreversible truth. You were never broken. You were programmed. Every guilt reflex, every flinch when you set a boundary, every urge to explain yourself was conditioned, not by truth, by repetition. You didn't choose the emotion. It was attached to you by someone who needed you small, quiet, predictable. And you stayed there because no one ever told you you could detach the hook without losing your humanity. You don't need healing. You need clarity. You don't need to feel less. You need to feel without obedience. You're not too much. You were too trained to shrink. You're not cold. You were too tired of being emotionally looted. From this moment forward, every emotion that rises gets questioned, not feared, not followed, filtered. When shame speaks, you pose. You ask, what identity is this trying to enforce? You tag it. You reject it. You move. When guilt hits, you don't justify. You recognize the pattern. You stay still. 24-hour challenge. Every time you feel like you owe a reaction. Don't. Every time someone tries to guilt you into becoming smaller, observe, label, withdraw. You'll feel stronger with every silence. Not because you suppressed emotion, but because you finally refused to follow someone else's programming. You're not here to be liked. You're here to be sovereign. Not soft. Not palatable. True. The system is rewritten, and they can't hook what no longer opens. Final screen fade to black. They didn't steal your identity. They attached emotions to it until you obeyed. Subscribe for more subconscious rewiring blueprints. And remember, you're not too emotional. You're just done being controlled by what you feel.